Come on, buddy. Scoop. And there he goes. Okay, bud. Shake it off. You can do it. Up you go.
Stand up, please. I'll bring your work down here.
Whoa, right on the floor.
Does it have sound?
Yeah, it does.
Stand up, please.
David, I can't even get you. You're so close to the floor. He's figured out the perfect place. David, let's get up. David, up.
Come on. Up.
David, up.
Good
job getting up. Woo.
Awesome.
Up, up. Come on, time to work. Where are you?
Up,
There
please.
you are.
Stand up.
David.
Stand up.
Up. 1, 2. Good job.
Let's go.
3. Almost had him. David, up. 1. Come on.
Stand up,
2.
please. Come on.
3. 4. He's going to feel that it's uncomfortable. 5. 6. Come on, David. Up. 7. Good job.
Let's go.
8. Good job, David. 9.
Let's go. We're going to go in the car. Let's
Come on.
car.
Earning car, David.
Stand up, please.
Earning car. Come on. Up. 1. Come on. Up. David, come on. Up. Up. Hey, I'm just trying to get your attention. Come on. Up. Yikes. I've never seen it this bad. Ever.
Okay, well, I'm going to pull out some work on the floor
Now
then.
we're going to have to work on the floor, David. A good picture here, sweetheart. Something these don't have flashes on them.
Yeah, the best one. Okay, come on. He's so low now, I can't even hardly picture
Put
it.
anything under there. He knows that too. That's all I can do.
Look. What's this? Sure, that's
Good
right.
talking, David.
What's this? Socks. Good job.
Shutting down, stuck, flat affect, lethargy, deadness, exhaustion, chronic fatigue, disorientation, disconnection, dissociation. Numb, dead, passive, no feelings, no energy, can't think, withdrawn, shut down, not there, can't say no, ashamed. All of those are signs of chronic hypoarousal, the classic freeze response. And in autism, there is the more severe form of shutdown and catatonia.
In such a way that we feel like our survival is at stake. So the trauma really can be defined by your sense that you could be hurt. Your physical survival is at stake. And when we feel our physical survival is at stake, we have all these instincts inside that come up to protect ourselves. We can fight back, we can get away, we can scream for help, get somebody to come to us. And if none of those work, we might freeze like this and just try not to be seen, try not to draw attention to ourselves. Or we might shut down, which is also doesn't let us move, but it's a different response because we just go limp. Our muscles go soft. We stop feeling. We shut down ourselves. This is, that expression, playing possum. That's a version of that instinct. That's a shutdown response that in the wild can save your life because animals won't eat another animal that looks dead because animals die in the wild because of sickness, and it's an instinct for the predator not to eat that animal because then you might get sick. So these are natural instincts that come up with trauma. Okay.
My somatic experience practitioner trained also under Steve Hoskinson, who is the founder of Organic Intelligence.
You see this dorsovagal term here, and the dorsovagal term, that references Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory. When we were back in the day saying, oh, stress is the brake and the accelerator on at the same time, the brake was the parasympathetic branch, and people would remember it by parachute, bringing you down and so on, and rest and digest and so on. But it's more than that. And so Porges' contribution was nice because it says, it's not one system, but at least two. The parasympathetic has two major branches that are different, and they're different phylogenetically, they're different architecturally, and they're different functionally, which means they're different in terms of their evolutionary history, which is where Porges traced it. They're different in the nerves and the way they're operating. For instance, the ventral or the engagement system is more myelinated and the dorsal system is not as myelinated. And then it's different functionally. So these two branches are functionally quite different. The dorsovagal process, Porges traced way back to cartilaginous fish. And remember when I was going, the paramecium's moving around, it's locomotion that goes, the most primitive self-protective response is don't move. Like, stop your locomotion, because predators often need motion to stimulate their predatory approach. So if I can just go, then I'm not so much a target. But it goes all the way back then to cartilaginous fish. So if you've seen like National Geographic, you're seeing deep under the sea, and then these wild creatures, just going by, and then they come out again. All of that FREEZY business is older than bones. FREEZY business is older than bones. And so that's old. That's pretty old. No, it's old, and so it's more primitive. So that's the phylogenetic piece. That's its evolutionary piece. Architecturally, in terms of how it's operating, it is innervating primarily subdiaphragmatically, the organs, the visceral system, and it is mostly feeding back information that's important for homeostasis. So it's sussing out, hey, how things going in the most vital regions here, organ system, right? And so it's giving back that information, and then functionally, it is really good at freezing. I mean, it's always involved in things like peristalsis and so on, but but it is also this freezing system, or the system, and wow, that's an oxygen conservation system. So you slow down the heart rate, you slow down the need for oxygen, you slow down the metabolic process, and the system can operate in a hypoxic state more readily. You hear every now and then, the kiddos falling through the ice, they've been under there 15, 30 minutes, and with careful sort of resuscitation, they can actually be okay without like significant brain damage. That always mystifies people until you get like, oh yeah, this freeze system starts to shut down oxygen using systems and just preserves that brain. So it's going to shut down, it's going to slow down this oxygen using process, and giving you a chance to, get rescued and get oxygen back to the brain. It's super amazing and super problematic when it is ongoing and not resolved. So I guess moving on then to our work with it, freeze has important psychological and behavioral and sort of components, such that for us, freeze means, and there's a whole continuum of freeze. Have we done the dissociative continuum yet? We could do that. We could do that for sure. And there's a whole range of how freeze is going to manifest. Everything from an out-of-body experience or catatonia to like, I dinged my little pinky and there's a little bit of numbness there. So it can be this really micro expression of it all the way to this, massive systemic shutdown. And then as we experience it, it's going to be a diminution of, or a decrease of affective range, affective modulation that includes prosody, the voice and the way that we are singing. If you ever listen to a mom or a parent with a baby, they're singing to those babies, and that prosody is this ventral vagal thing, as opposed to the flattened affect and the breathy voice and the pitch not modulating like that. We had a flight attendant, a guy who was talking like something like this onto his thing. It's like, that's that you're immediately hearing. That's FREEZY business impinged on his system. So the prosody is the modulation of pitch. That's a part of the system. So when you're think depression and somebody not having the energy, and also like the ventral vagal system innervates the facial muscles. So all of like baby communication, when and communication with lovers and friends, there's all of this like emotional signaling that's nuanced as all get out. We're talking about orientation and connecting to the environment through the senses. When Phil was saying, there are people out there, he was orienting. His system was orienting social engagement, and that's prototypical ventral vagal process. So part of the reason that we are so keen on orientation is that it primes for that ventral vagal system, which shows up in its prototypical form as social engagement. But for us, because our attachment history has been so compromised and is so impoverished, like people and tribe is sketchy. So I'm pretty ambivalent about other people, and so for good reason. But it means that we use the ventral vagal impulse and architecture in a free-form way by saying, oh, what if you just let your eyes go where they want to go? And then you leave it up to the organism to choose what it's going to find as the target of its ventral vagal search. And a lot of times it'll find nature. And sometimes you will be with a person who's really sort of dialed in, and they'll just look at you, going, my eyes are going, where they want to go, right? And so, and then there is freeze face, right? Like flattened affect, not much mobility, not much movement or pitch. So, which, by the way, has really, like, all of that signaling is what feeds baby brains. That grows dendrites in baby brains, really important. And if you Botox that away, the baby's like, what happened to mom? Who put Frankenstein up here? The zombie movies, I ain't ready for that. So that's that's important. That social engagement signaling is what helps us understand tribe and how you're doing. I get an instant snapshot of your entire system just by seeing how things are there, right? So, and Porges' contribution to our understanding of the autonomic nervous system is that, like back in the day, we would say, oh, stress, that means you have the accelerator and the brake on at the same time. And the accelerator is sympathetic arousal. And remember, sympathetic arousal isn't just fight or flight. When we're talking about sympathetic arousal and this curve here, this is just the acceleration of high intensity on sympathetic arousal. You have whole ranges that aren't pictured down here that are just the easy metabolic function and contribution of that energy system into our biology. So when we're talking about sympathetic arousal in this range, we're just talking about the higher intensity zones, especially those that are pertaining to the survival responses of fight and flight. That's the highest intensity of sympathetic arousal. And just as a little extra nerdy information, in terms of fight and flight and even of freeze, there are areas in the brainstem and the periaqueductal gray that are localized for those kinds of behaviors and organizing those kinds of behaviors. So even though it is fueled by sympathetic arousal, it still has these distinct sort of pathways, say, for fight and flight. That's why we can say sympathetic arousal isn't just fight and flight, or it's not one general energy system. It's also really quite refined. So the resolution of that and the completion of that, the movement of thresholds up through that, and my comfort in that is handled by the fact that in freeze there is just as much blue as red, right? Every stick has two ends, and so in this graph here, you see this is the freezy business. Things are fragmented, they're kind of broken apart, they are dissociated, but it has just as much blue as red. So I'm not afraid of freeze. There is plenty of mojo and exceeding mojo in these states, because with less emotion, with less sensation, with less sort of input from the outside, I can have less of a discrete experience of myself and of borders and boundaries. Like if I don't feel where I begin and end, suddenly I can receive and perceive things that are outside of myself, and in fact, I'm not even sure where outside of myself might be. Some of us think this experience of oneness and non-self, for instance, is a really important step. You get a taste of that from being in freeze. And a blue side of that is I don't have the narrow conditioning input from my physiology that actually begins to let's hold the mic for just a second, because I have a queue of people who are asking questions. So my sense of self is important to build, but it's basically built around I like it, I don't like it, the approach avoidance system, what's red and what's blue. I'm a person who likes sashimi. I'm a person who really enjoys ramen. I'm a person who is a mover, I like movement, and there are certain things that I don't like, and, like scratchy t-shirts or something, right? I mean, there's a whole, that's me. But if you ask somebody in this state, oh, do you like t-shirts that are maybe more, maybe not bamboo or soft cotton or stuff, it's like, I don't know. Do you want to go see a movie? Yeah, I don't know. It's like, yeah, what do you want to see? I don't know. What do you want to see? I don't know. What do you want to see? And so it's undifferentiated. I'm not sure. What do you like? What do you think I should like? I'm not sure. I don't have my reds and blues identified. I'm undifferentiated. Right? So part of what we're trying to do is help them differentiate by going, okay, yeah, would it be better for you to would it sit or stand? You want to talk, not talk. You want to sit over here, over there. You want the blinds up or blinds down? Do you like this? Do you not like this? Do you like that? Do you not like that? And all of that is beginning to identify and create self. And that's, you know, for people that are in the whole non-dual thing, that's a problem. It's like, hey, wait a minute, aren't we trying to get that? You can't transcend self till you got one. And so we're trying to build then ego strengthening by building that sense of, hey, I'm this. I like this. I don't like that. And my reds and blues and the clearer differentiation, definition of those creates a sense of where and how I am in terms of emotional and cognitive definition, and then hopefully also a bit of the sensation that goes with that. This is me. That's ego strength. And to be able to get feedback of like, oh, now I'm choosing to take this action, and I can actually have a thought, oh, now I'm going to take this action and follow through with that and get feedback on it. That reinforces this agency that says, I can do this, I can. And the first word of that is I. Like, I have capacity, I have agency, I can act on the world, and the world gives me feedback that I just did that. As opposed to Botox face, right? Botox face is no response. And that's where I don't exist because what I do gets no feedback. So feedback is key, and that builds back ego strengthening that then we can take into, say, a freezy state, and then all of that can dissolve. All of that can let go. And again, part of the reason that Jack Kornfield and others had me talk to their teachers is because people get into freezy states and they begin to disappear, but without the ego strength to say, oh yes, now I feel released from self, rather than I'm fragmenting and I don't know where I am. That's the red side is I am disappearing, I'm going where? And the blue side is I'm released from this conditioning, and I feel the participation with everything that is without distinction. So that's a pretty big blue, right? And the unhooking of the reds from that blue is really key, so that we can just get that state of dorsal vagal. So, but it's that, to me, that the end game is biological synchrony, which means all of these states are working in concert. That is, I've got access to my freeziness. I've got access to those states and all the benefits of those states. I've got access to sympathetic arousal. And the freezy business is oneness, non-identification, non-attachment, and sort of emotional neutrality, or on the red side, flatness. And then on the sympathetic side, sympathetic is really good at the honing of attention. So I have singleness. So at the same time I'm everything, the sympathetic says I'm this. And I can hold those apparently paradoxical poles at the same time. And I've got this singularity and focus and energy. So I like focus and energy. Freezy business is got everything, right? The whole range, nothing distinct in any of that. Right? Sympathetic says, yeah, I've got the whole thing, but I also have singleness of focus and also singleness of existence. So I can experience the distinction of reds and blues, and then the feeling of all of those together is me. And so if you get the oneness, you get the singleness, then you add the ventral vagal system, which is really unique for our species, and that's love. That's the warmth of caring and our social engagement, our existence as social beings and connected beings and tribal beings, which means that I care as much for you as I do for myself, because we are together. And if I can do that within the framework of both singleness and within the understanding of everything together, we have something here. Because it seems to me the challenge of our movement is to be able to hold distinction, like the value of culture, and at the same time hold the larger frame of like the family of life. Certainly a human family, but also the family of life. If I can participate in all of that while not losing distinctness, then we've really got something. If I have the energy then to act effectively within that, I begin to manifest an input into the planet that I think is going to be A, enjoyable, fun, and B, more effective. So FREEZY business, gotta love it.
It's really important to understand that there's a distinct difference in a person or a child's conscious thinking and their neurobiological response. So remembering that that neurobiological response does not give a damn about details. It doesn't know what your wants and desires are. It's just purely primal, animal. That's our animal brain. So it goes, we need to survive. Our conscious thinking is about what do we want and need and what are our emotional responses. This here, the neurobiological process just goes, what information are we getting from our senses and how much of that is a threat, how much of it is safe. Have a distinct neurobiology. We're autistic people, but we also have an overactive threat response. Live a lot of your life in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Often, I'm a very relaxed person in my own environment. However, I check in regularly with my body and it's always tense. It's always tensed up. And that is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. That's the threat response. So even when my mind is completely relaxed, the neurobiology still is overactive and still tenses up my body ready to do whatever I need to do to get the hell out of there.
The factors which cause psychological distress and non-coping to autistic people and can lead to a breakdown in the form of catatonia are related to their underlying autistic sensitivities and needs, and also an inability to express their distress and self-regulate their emotions and reactions. Autistic people, even those who are high-functioning, are generally unable to express feelings of anxiety and psychological and emotional distress, and to ask for help and support appropriately. Autistic individuals often feel intense emotion, but are unable to express it appropriately. Those who are passive and have initiation difficulties are extremely vulnerable to being exploited and would be unable to protect themselves, complain, or communicate their distress or fears directly. In fact, autistic individuals in the passive group were significantly more likely to develop catatonia type deterioration compared to other groups on the wing and gold categories of social impairment. Psychological factors: sensory overload, specific triggers, or generally being overwhelmed. Emotional overload. Many autistic people feel positive and negative emotions very strongly, to the point of becoming overwhelmed. Negative social experiences, such as bullying, abuse, violence, and exploitation. Negative institutional experiences, described by some autistic people as feeling crushed. Lack of diagnosis of autism, especially in high-functioning people, feelings of pressure, guilt, and underachievement in very intellectually high-functioning girls especially. Not coping when the normal cognitive and logical strategies do not work in novel or unexpected social situations, relationships. This affects high-functioning individuals, especially girls, who have been able to get by without the diagnosis of autism by masking their difficulties with cognitive strategies. The causes of stress, distress, and non-coping leading to catatonia, shutdown, and breakdown are often external aspects to do with the ecological factors. This can only be worked out by understanding the person's autism and needs, looking at the mismatch between their needs and the environment and milieu factors.
Immobility, we're basically talking about people being stuck, so that there's a movement that they need to make and they have difficulty making that movement. They may look frozen, or sometimes we use the word in a stupor. They may stare off for a while, or be in the middle of a movement and not be able to complete it. And the DSM-5 tells us that one of the reasons that catatonia has been so poorly understood is because it has such a confusing presentation. At one point in the day, an individual can be excited or active, and at the other point in the day, they can seem frozen. And all of that's related to the same thing, to the underlying catatonia that I call stuck. And actually, I call it that because in working with individuals with autism and catatonia, they often describe themselves as feeling stuck. Some of the things that you might see are difficulty eating or drinking, and you could see that eating or drinking is slowed way down. Some people can't eat at all, some people can, but it's a very slow process. And it's excruciatingly slow to watch. So they may need an hour to eat 3 bites of some food. Another way that you might see stuckness is in their actions, in the way that they move. You might see them begin a movement and then freeze before they can continue that movement. You might see them start a movement and then have to start over before they can get past that stuckness. An interesting symptom that we see sometimes is difficulty crossing lines, and in particular you might notice that at a threshold, at a doorway. Sometimes you'll be with an individual with autism and catatonia, and when they hit the door to enter a home or to enter a classroom, any kind of door, they may have difficulty moving over the threshold. They may get stuck right there at that line. You may see stuckness in just a general slowness of movement in the individual. Additionally, you can see that their posture in general is stiff and looks stuck. And lastly, you may see that the individual is not very responsive to things around them. They're minimally responsive to their environment. During times when a person with catatonia is in a stupor, and we've talked about that before, during times where they are sitting with their eyes open, but not interacting with the world around them, not very responsive to their environment, that reports across history, and the best evidence we have is that during that time, those individuals are in an intense state of fear, that they are horrified by something that's like a waking nightmare. And there is reason to believe that that is also true in individuals with autism. So if you're working with someone who shows signs of catatonia, and you see them at times where they are kind of frozen, they're kind of in that state where they're looking around maybe, but they're not responsive to their environment. And I imagine many of you work with someone like that or know someone who experiences that. Then I think it's helpful to have in the back of your mind, or maybe in the foreground of your thoughts, this person may be terrified by something that's going on with them internally. And they could hear you. And you may be able to be calming and reassuring during a time when they're not able to visually respond to you, but you may actually be able to make a difference for them in their experience of that terrible thing. And what Fink and Shorter tell us is that they believe that this sense of dread may actually lead to the onset of catatonia. It may lead to the episodes of catatonia. And I'm not sure yet how to incorporate that in intervention. It's just very important in my thinking right now, and I want it to be a part of your thinking. So I hope that's helpful.
Compiling a psychological profile of the individual in the context of catatonia, shutdown and breakdown. Relevant developmental history with emphasis on early regression, sensitivity, and overlapping autism catatonia features. Change over time, pattern of social interaction, impairment with emphasis on evidence of passivity, sociability, relationships, and tolerance of social demands. Communication ability and profile with emphasis on special methods, devices to enhance the individual's communication. Many autistic people have developed a catatonia-related breakdown after leaving school, when they stayed at home without any structured occupation, routine, and organized external activities. Is the service autism specific? Does it have autism-friendly systems and an autism-friendly environment? It is important not to make assumptions that the program and service is suitable for the autistic individual just because it is supposed to be autism-specific. Is the level of structure, routine, consistency, and predictability suitable for the individual's needs? Is the program suitable for their level of autism and ability, bearing in mind that autistic individuals can have an uneven profile of cognitive ability? Is the level of stimulation and demand too much or too little? Are there factors which are overwhelming, frightening, or stress and anxiety provoking? For example, noise, chaos, too much going on.